Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. My name is JP, and today I'm joined by Tim Diacono, and these are your 5 headlines for today. Disability Commissioner touted for co-option after MP Gavin Gulia fast resignation. Charmaine Gauci confirms flu cases very low this year. Melita cyber attack leads to internet outage across Malta. Maltese father begins hunger strike due to unfair court bias, keeping him away from his daughters. And animal abusers should be banned from owning pets, says new Animal Welfare Commissioner Alison Bezzina. Tim?
Yeah, so now you see him, now you don't. Gavin Gulia was elected to Parliament for the Labour Party in a casual election, but yesterday he just resigned in his very first parliamentary speech. His point is that the Prime Minister wanted to stay on as head of the Malta Tourism Authority. Now what this means is that the party can now just co-opt an MP without having to go for an election, and several reports say that the person who's going to replace Gavin Gulia is none other than Oliver Scicluna, who's the head of the Disability Commission. I think it's a really interesting choice. He's known to have made quite a lot of progress in the fields of disability rights, and he's known as a pioneer in this field locally, and it's quite a strong statement by having him there. However, there are obviously the usual democratic arguments whether they should be allowed or not. At the end of the day, though, these are the rules of the game, and I think Oliver Scicluna is a very welcome figure in Maltese politics.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one person who definitely wasn't happy with how this turned out was former Rabat Mayor Charles Atsipadi, who had contested for the MP seat in the general election. He said the party blocked him from his right to contest the role and from the seat. And in a statement, he took a powerful stance and said democracy has died as a result of this. Obviously, I can understand where he's coming from. There was a general election, and people had voted fairly and whatnot, but this whole co-option scenario is somewhat unfair to him. But like you said, those are the rules, and this is how it turns out to be. I guess we'll see. But Gavin Gulia is the shortest MP in Maltese history. Just minutes after he entered the House, entered Parliament, he resigned. It was pretty strange and pretty hilarious to hear yesterday. Moving on to our second story. Charmaine Gauci confirms flu cases are very low this year. What a lot of people believe might have been a twin-demic, it has been thankfully averted after the Health Ministry embarked on a massive inoculation campaign last year, recording 157,000 people vaccinated in just a few months for the flu vaccine, which is great news to hear. Obviously, the flu comes out once a year, and everyone tries to avoid it, obviously. But last year we dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, so we were facing potentially 2 pandemics. But the Health Ministry managed to avoid that by vaccinating, introducing more flu vaccines and vaccinating people within a short period of time. Hopefully, we can do the same with the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, the case is, though we might have averted a flu pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic is still here. In fact, our daily average has risen to 192, which is the highest it's ever been, and there's obviously some worrying statistics, but the Superintendent of Public Health, Charmaine Gauci, said that there is currently no need to implement more restrictions in place, that if they were going to do so, it would need to be assess more the situation as it is before we implement more restrictions, like is being done in the rest of the world. And in China especially, they've now put 22 million people in lockdown. The UK is in lockdown. Thankfully, Malta, for the time being, has avoided a lockdown, but we'll obviously have to wait and see how it all pans out. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, obviously now focus turns to the vaccine on everyone's lips, the COVID-19 vaccine. Unfortunately, there's an information blackout in terms of how many people have actually received the vaccine. Mm-hmm. What we do know is that today, people over the age of 85 who live by themselves should start actually getting vaccinated. We're still in the first cohort of people who are getting vaccinated. Unfortunately, the health ministry isn't providing numbers on a daily basis like other countries are. Mm-hmm. Moving on, Melita users yesterday noticed that the internet was suddenly cut in the afternoon, and this was due to a cyber attack that hit Melita yesterday. Now we spoke to Melita and they confirmed that there was a DDoS attack by criminals who wanted to extort money. Now they unfortunately said that this is increasingly common. They have to constantly invest in new cybersecurity measures to combat these threats. It's not the first of these major DDoS attacks that Malta has witnessed, and yes, it is a reality that this is something that, as the world becomes more digital, crime becomes more digital as well.
Absolutely. So all our assets move online and whatnot. It's important that we obviously take security. We see security more in terms of in terms online and how we can protect online. And yeah, we know to make sure that we're up to game both as internet providers and as individuals when it comes to our security, because with blockchain and cryptocurrencies taking hold now, we make sure that all our online assets are taken care of. They're as important as they are our physical assets, whether you go when you go to the bank and deposit money. Moving on to our fourth story for today, a Maltese father has begun his hunger strike due to what he claims is unfair court bias, which have kept him away from his two daughters. Ashley Gaia, father of two, started his hunger strike on Tuesday evening after what has been a long and drawn-out ordeal surrounding claims of domestic abuse against his partner, which he claims are unfounded, which are untrue. Essentially, how the story goes is that his partner claimed that he was abusing her without any evidence or any trials or any proceedings or due process. Ashley Gaia was removed from his household, stripped away from his daughters, and torn. Basically, his life was torn apart. This is all before he is yet still to be found guilty of any of the accusations brought against him, and essentially his life has been flipped upside down. He's only able to see his daughters twice a week as a result of this. And in his words, he said, he's been made, framed as guilty before proven innocent, and he faces an upward battle against the legal system. I keep repeating the point, but I think it's an emphasis to make all this before he's been found guilty of any domestic violence. Obviously, it's a very touchy subject. It's a very serious subject. We need to obviously put the most emphasis on domestic violence if there are signs of it and if it is true. So it's a very delicate situation legally to deal with. I mean, obviously you want to remove someone from a situation if there is domestic violence, but in a case where there's no evidence like this, for Ashley, it's very hard for him, and obviously not being stripped away from his children, as I'm sure every parent would know, is very tough, resulting in him going on this hunger strike. Tim, I think there's some more restrictions put on him, which are pretty crazy, right?
Yeah. In fact, he was actually told by police that he had to wear a camera on his body 24 hours a day if he was allowed inside his home, which is extremely creepy. Obviously, unsurprisingly, he refused. But yes, this is one of several cases of parental alienation. Unfortunately, the problem with these cases is that no one really knows what goes on behind the four walls of the home besides the people involved. However, it is a reality that court cases do take extremely long to conclude, and that in this period of waiting, people's lives are being ruined, and in these cases of alimony and separation, the father does seem to keep getting the short end of the stick, which just seem very unfair. Moving on to our final story, we spoke to Alison Benzina, the new Animal Rights Commissioner, about whether people who abuse animals should be allowed to adopt new pets. And her answer was emphatic: no, they should not be allowed once you've had your pets confiscated from you because for reasons of abuse. You should not be allowed to just go out and adopt a new animal. Interestingly, she's saying this should kick in once once the pets are confiscated.
Exactly.
Whereas the Minister for Animal Rights is saying that, yes, I agree with you, but only once the courts have decided and ruled that this person is guilty should you be banned from owning animals. What do you make of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the point she was making is that the director of animal welfare, who has yet still to be chosen after Nolan Montebello left a few months ago, has the right to confiscate animals off someone allegedly abusing them. So it's a power that's taken very seriously. They only really confiscate animals in very dire situations. But once this is done, Bettina argues that the director should also be able to confiscate the person from owning animals, so that until court proceedings are heard and they decide otherwise. Obviously, this comes in light of a high-profile animal abuse case, or a high-profile case relating to animals last year, which was that of Andre Gallia, the Msida dog owner whose 2 dogs attacked and killed his grandmother. Lovin Daily was informed that Gallia has since adopted more dogs, even though he had surrendered most of his pets. He has now gotten his hands on more dogs, and he is yet to still face trial for what happened. Now he's not facing trial supposedly for animal abuse as such, but he's facing
charged yet, right?
He hasn't been charged yet, but he's facing charges of involuntary homicide. But either way, he's managed to adopt more dogs since then, which seems a bit crazy. I think Tim, you mentioned earlier, if it was a child and you were a child was found to be abused, someone was abusing a child, and you took the child away from him, you wouldn't let that person adopt another child. It just
absolutely
seems baffling. It's a bit crazy. And even when courts do decide on these people found for animal abuse, it's very unevenly. It's not all the time that they ban them ever from owning pets again. They might get a suspended sentence, they might get a fine, but in some cases, these people who are found guilty of animal abuse are able to own pets in the future, which is where I think the Minister Anton Meflo came out speaking, saying, hey, once they're found guilty, they should be banned for life from owning pets. And I couldn't agree more. I think it makes total sense, and I think Malta needs this drastic change. So totally for it. With that being said, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining us today, and have a day full of lovin'.